bit different today. We got boots on and weather gear on, and we're doing surfs at 20 knots, 30 knots, and stopping at 10. So it's a bit of rock and roll, but let's go have a look outside.
Hello Sea Wolves, and welcome back to the show. Another 24 hours of racing has gone, and well, stuff is starting to happen. It's very interesting for those of you who are watching the Vendeeglobe for the first time, and for those of you who've been with us in the last edition also. Every Vendeeglobe starts with a great feeling of this time we are prepared. This time the boats are ready for the Southern Ocean. This time, all this and this and this stuff that broke down last time, we got this now, we got this now. But then, as we start to get closer to the beast that is the Southern Ocean, the test of all things man-made that is the Southern Ocean, we start to see the first little things going wrong and breaking down, and the sailors start to have to really work on, keeping everything in one piece. And similarly in this episode, it's very interesting and humbling to see that this is really a constant in every Vendeeglobe. And everything that's been solved, everything that's been innovated, last edition, this edition, we will have new problems and things will break down in new and interesting ways. And in the end, that is the ultimate challenge of the Vendeeglobe. In order to finish first, you must first finish. That goes very much for this race indeed. So welcome back. I'm Florian, by the way. So a lot of you were asking, like, say your name. You never say your name. It's not about me here, but my name is Florian. Welcome to the show. And well, lots happening today. But before we get into all that, of course, we first have a toast to get to. So I hope you guys are ready with something delicious in your possibly official Sea Wolf mug. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Cheers, Wolves.
Hello everyone, it's Ollie on boat Toot Goot on day number 18 of the Vendeeglobe. Yesterday I mentioned to you that currently we're kind of sailing upwind and the boat heels over quite a lot and it's not very comfortable to move around and live in. I don't know how well I brought my point across, but now after another 24 hours I can really start to feel the angle. Moving around is not easy. It's always like you're climbing a mountain or you actually walk down a mountain. We're heeling over an average about 25 degrees. So life is not very nice. What also goes with it is you need to really be careful and you need to have everything stowed away properly at this angle. Otherwise things can go flying around easily. This will keep going for another about 12 hours until the wind angle moves further to the back and the boat will accelerate again and we go faster. But so far, all good on board. I'll give you an update again soon. Cheers.
And speaking of speed, another new 24-hour speed record. Sebastian Simon on Groupe de Brielle has broken the 600 mile in 24 hours record on a monohull sailing solo, I should say, with a whopping 610.06 miles or 1,129 kilometers. on a sailboat sailing solo monohull. Well, it's really a crazy record. I think there may still be about 24 hours left for one of the other 4 guys in the front to maybe top it, but I think we're getting pretty close to the high potential speeds of the boats. The wind is also going a little bit down, and I think the sea state is a bit higher than it was before. So the conditions to break this type of records are getting less and less favorable. And in the Southern Ocean, even though they'll probably have some stretches where they have way more wind, the sea states are so big there that setting a record like that is going to be pretty difficult. It might still happen, there might be some lucky good conditions there, but the chance is fairly small. So if they don't break the record here, we have to wait either to the end of the race when they go back up again, and maybe they have favorable conditions again in the kind of the Southern Atlantic, or it will be maybe in another ocean race, but then it will be like a crude record again. So could be a few years before this is broken if Simon is able to, or Sebastian is able to hang on to it, but a pretty impressive record anyways. So that's pretty cool. Then we get into those first little problems. So Justine Metro on board of Team Snef losing her J0. Apparently something broke, like a block or something. She was able to bring it back on the water, but of course missing your J0. For those of you who are maybe a bit more new to the race, a quick explanation. So a sailboat kind of has gears, like on a car, right? You have like your first gear, second gear, third gear. But on a sailboat, you can think of the sails as gears. So they have several different sails. It depends a bit from boat to boat because there are individual options there, and all the boats are different in design, so they're all cut a little bit differently and individually. But in general, as a rule of thumb, we have on this particular race, we have A sails and J sails. And A stands for asymmetrical and J stands for jib. Now, asymmetric sails, or spinnakers as we call them, are very big sails, and the essence of them is that they go far beyond the mast. So we have something called the fore triangle, which is kind of where the mast goes down, and then the line that goes from the top of the mast to the front of the boat. It kind of creates a triangle like that. We call that the fore triangle. Now, asymmetricals are attached to a point in front and to a single point on the top. The luff is kind of flying free for the most part, so they can be kind of round, you know, you've probably seen videos of that. And then the other point where they kind of winch it in, you know, where they apply the power, it can go sometimes all the way to the back of the boat. It can go way past the mast. That's why we call them spinnakers. They're kind of big sails for light wind. The material is a bit thinner, a bit lighter, so that it's a bit more easier for the wind to lift. And of course, it's also a little bit less sturdy because it's meant for lighter winds. Now, J sails or jibs, the essence of a jib, so the range of jibs, start with the J0, which is the sail that fits exactly in the fore triangle. So the essence of jibs is that they're a bit more stronger sails, a bit more suited also for sailing into the wind, so upwind sailing. And especially when you're sailing upwind, tacking, that's kind of how you turn, is very important. And so the cool thing about a jib is, because it's cut, the biggest one at least, to the exact size more or less of the fore triangle, it fits very neatly through that fore triangle when you're kind of changing direction. So when the boat changes direction and the sail has to change from one side to the other, you can just kind of tack it, you know, fly it straight to the fore triangle to the other side, even though with the size of these, they usually furl them up quite a bit and then tack and then unfurl them again just to keep the sail in good shape. But technically speaking, you could tack them kind of the old-fashioned way because they fit through the fore triangle. And then we have J1 and J2, sometimes J3. Those are like sort of getting progressively smaller. So the higher the number, that also goes for the A sails. So A0 is kind of the biggest one. I got A1, A2, A3. Well, some boats have like, you know, you can have 10 of them, but generally they have 3 on this particular race, or 2. And the higher the number, the bigger, the smaller the sail. So the lowest number is the biggest one. So the J0 is the biggest jib. So that's kind of, you can compare it to like your second to third gear maybe on a car. So in the light winds, you know, 5, 10, you know, maybe 10 to 12 knots, something like that. Maybe even a little bit more if you want to push it up to, let's say, 15, maybe 16 knots. That's the type of winds when you can use one of your spinnakers, when you can use some of your A sails. So in the very light winds, you use the very big ones. Bit more wind, you use like a slightly smaller spinnaker. But then at around like 15, 16 knots, you get to the point where you'd rather use a jib because it's safer, it's a bit stronger. If you have 15 to 16 knots, you're probably going to have gusts maybe that are like maybe up to 5 knots more. So that goes into the 20 knots. And 20 knots is really kind of really pushing it with an asymmetrical. So you'd rather not do that because then you can like get overpowered or you can damage something, or you know, your block can break or things like that. So you don't really want to do that. So the J0 is that sail that is very important and crucial around, let's say, 15 to 20 knot space, because it has like a lot of surface still. So it's like that. It's like your second to third gear. And then if you get more wind, so if you go into the steady like 18, 19, 20 knots with gusts up to like 23, 24, 25, that's maybe where you start using like a jib 2, or if it gets even higher, maybe even a jib 3. So they get progressively smaller also. And a jib 3 is more like a really like a storm jib, right? Like you can even use that up to like 40 or like bigger winds like that. So missing a J0 is a lot like not having your second or third gear. And so for Justine, it's going to be pretty challenging missing that sail on board L'Occitane. I forget her name now just for a second. Isabel Joschke, no, not Isabel Joschke. Clarice Kramer also lost her, I think not her J0, but I think she lost like her A1. So that's one size bigger, let's say, so that's even more for light wind. And that's also one of the reasons why she fell back a little bit, because we had some light winds, and then when you don't have the perfect sail for that, you have the option to either go one sail bigger, but then you're maybe overpowering your boat a little bit, you're running more risk of maybe damaging something, because you're putting actually too much stress on the sail and all the systems that are supporting that sail. Or you have to go with sail smaller, but then you're kind of underpowered and you're a little bit slower than the rest who are using the appropriate sail. So when you miss a sail like that, it's a little bit like trying to do a car race while missing a gear, right? So somewhere in the powertrain, you're missing kind of one link, which makes it very hard. Now, fortunately for Justine, we're almost in the Southern Ocean, and that's a place where almost always the wind is like quite above 15 to 16 knots. So you don't really need the J0 there. You can pretty much use a J1 or a J2 for most of the time. But still, there can still be some situations, or in like quiet nights when the wind sometimes goes down a bit, where you would very much like to use a J0. And in that case, she will now have to either use a sail that's a little bit bigger, running a bit more risk, or a little bit smaller. But then probably the other boats around her that will be using the appropriate J0 are going to be a little bit faster. And so, yeah, that's something that she's definitely not the first, and she's definitely not the last. So this type of damage, very common in the Vendeeglobe as we progress, especially in the Southern Ocean with all of the movement going on. Similar small damage on board Medallia. So Pip breaking one of her winches, which is of course really disastrous. Now she has multiple, so most of the boats have four big winches at least. So they can easily, switch basically any rope to any of the winches. Sometimes they have to like jerry-rig it a little bit, but it's generally not a problem. So it's not like she's right away kind of dead in the water, or is like right away having a problem. But sometimes you do need like 2-3 winches to make certain maneuvers easy. Otherwise you have to hook things off, then put something else on, and you can't kind of move several lines at the time as you would want to in order to make some maneuvers. So for her also, as I understand it, she spent like several hours in pretty strong winds, going like 20 to 22 knots of speed, bumping along quite a bit, while taking the entire winch apart and fixing it. And I actually remember that in the ocean waves we also had one situation where one of our winches was broken, and I was so surprised actually that one of the sailors, I don't remember who on board it was taking apart like the entire thing, taking the ball bearings out, cleaning everything while we were, I think it was in the middle of the night, just kind of, booking like really fast through the high waves and stuff. And she was just like putting everything together, and I guess it took like 2 hours or something to clean the whole thing, put it all back together, get it working again. So I can appreciate how difficult it is, especially when you're on your own, taking those ball bearings and working with all this pretty fiddly insides of a winch like that. So that's a pretty taxing and tough job to do while on the way. But that's the Vendeeglobe race. Speaking of maneuvers and sail changes and little damages like that, Louise Duke made a nice video also a little bit about a question that many of you asked, like what does it take to make like a sail change? How much time does it take to make a maneuver like that? Now it depends a bit on the situation, because tacking is easier than jibing, and there are a few like things that make it like really hard. But as a rule of thumb, you can imagine that a tack on one of these Imocas takes somewhere between like 12 and maybe like 16 or 17 minutes to do everything. So that because they have to they have to get ready for the attack. So it depends a bit from boat to boat what the exact sequence of things is. But they have to take the water balance and switch that from one side to the other. So then the boat becomes very unbalanced and also becomes harder to sail. That takes a little time. Or maybe some boats may actually balance the ballast. So instead of having all the water ballast on one side, they may empty one side a bit and putting the boat more towards like a center weight, let's say. Then there is like several lines and stays that have to be made ready or ready to be adjusted, because they have double back stays that they have to release one and tension the other as the attack happens. So there are a lot of preparations that have to go on before they can make the actual change. And then when the change happens, and the boat is actually flipped to the other side, then there's a matter of switching lots of other weights. So a change of direction like attack isn't really done until all of the internal weights, so the sails, the food, the supplies, all the other stuff that they're using for weight has also been shifted internally, right? So it's a lot of work, it takes a lot of time. And Lewis Duke made a nice video today just of him kind of taking out one of his sails from his sails locker, which are in the front of the boat, and just kind of preparing it on deck. So you're seeing it here behind while I'm talking. And yeah, you can see how much work it is, because all of these objects are pretty big. Those sail sacks, they're pretty heavy. They're weighing something like 40, sometimes 50 or 60 kilos. So even though they have a lot of good grab rails, it's pretty easy to grab them. They're well grabbable, but it takes a lot of force to kind of move those objects around. So it is pretty difficult. It's real hard work to do a sail change like that, or to make a tack or a jibe within a mock. Wow, that was a lot of updates. So time for the strategic weather update. Dive in here with me. So right now I'm looking at the pressure map very deliberately, and I have here in Vendee the Vendeeglobe 2024 app on, so you can see all the sailors here. Charlie Dalin still nicely in the lead, about 40 kilometers ahead of the number 2, so still pretty comfortable. But you can see the ice exclusion zone here, and especially when we look at the pressure here, you can see that this high pressure means not so much wind, is extending right deeply into the ice exclusion zone. So that means that the sailors are kind of stuck. There's kind of this barrier there. Now if I look at the wind, it's going to look a little less intimidating, because you can see that it's mostly the internal structure of this high pressure where there really is no wind at all. And that there is still some runway for the sailors to continue on sailing, right? So they still have a path here. And if we fast forward a bit, you can kind of see how things will progress. So as you see over the next 10 to 20 hours, let me scroll a little bit faster here. We see that almost like a door opening. This high pressure, which is the St. Helena high, is going to be sort of sliding upwards, almost creating like a door over the next 24 hours. It's like almost like it sort of scoops up for our brave sailors. So Mother Nature is working with us here to create an opening, but it's going to be a bit of a navigational challenge, because if we go back to the point now, so we look at the picture now, we can kind of envision the course like this, kind of going south and then going as close as possible to the ice exclusion zone, because that's generally where there is the most wind. And then if we start hopping forward, we can see a bit kind of what the wind brings. So if we say about 24 hours from now, we're going to get about here, then another 24 hours about there, another 24 hours probably about there. It depends a bit on how much wind they got, of course. So let's hop 24 hours ahead. Well, then we see that in that particular location, we have some pretty good wind. If we hop another 24 hours, we see that they can kind of move to that second part also relatively well. Then if we go up another 24 hours, which is, basically 2.5 days from now, that should bring us really sort of slightly past the Cape. We see that they're going to be in great wind, kind of, somewhere around this area, distance-wise, depends a bit on how fast they're going. So the laggers will be in the end, but Charlie might be as far down as all the way down here. And for my mind, it looks like, quote unquote, smooth sailing from here. At least for the front runners, I think that the high pressure is just going to more or less miraculously get out of the way. They may get a few hours here and there of a little bit less wind, and they should keep south as much as possible, but it looks like pretty smooth sailing to me. Then for the second group, so that's kind of what I'm considering Samantha Davis and beyond, it's going to be a little bit more interesting because, let me delete the lines here. Yeah, so if we go back to the situation now, you can see that as they kind of come in, so if we draw their projected course sort of, you know, like this, and now if we go up about 12 hours, you can see that that kind of low wind area on the south side of the course is sort of coming up a little bit, creating a bit of a block, and that's going to be kind of right in their way as they're kind of going here, forcing them to sort of go maybe stay a little bit more, you know, kind of on a straight line maybe than they would want to, putting them right in between those two high pressure zones. And it is a prediction, so I would rather be below those two because the tendency for those two to kind of merge will be rather big, and that's kind of what you see happening here, right? So if we go kind of Saturday morning, you see that, you know, when you have two kind of swirls like that coming close, then they will pull into each other. That's kind of how you have to think of it. You know, if you have like water with two kind of swirls in there, they'll mix. And so I think that the leaders will be kind of past that. So everybody up to Paul Melot, not really a problem for them, I think. But for Samantha and the group and Boris and up to maybe, well, could be as high up as Pip and Lewis Burton, they're going to kind of run straight into that. So first they're going to inevitably kind of cut between those two systems, and then right as they merge, they're going to sort of try to get out there and go and get underneath. But location wise, it's going to be pretty tough to kind of, because there isn't really, it's like they're like one system is coming up from behind them, the other one's coming up in front, they're like right in the middle, and then as they go, it kind of will merge right in the place where they are, and there's no real way for them to kind of perfectly get around there. So I would say for them it's going to be try to stay as much south as possible so that when those two high pressures merge, they can hopefully, quote unquote, escape in order to mitigate the amount of time that they might get stuck with no wind there, sort of right before the Cape of Good Hope. Then for the foil, for the non-foiler fleet, I should say. First of all, we have now, I think, Eric Bellon in charge. So Jean lost his lead for now, and yeah, they're going south. You can see this high pressure sort of you know, kind of coming up. That's the same high pressure that's kind of in their way, that's making their way towards the St. Helena High to kind of merge there in front of the second foiler group. But once that passes, we see that it's, well, it's not exactly like a great you know, steady area of wind or anything like that, but we can see a new low that is starting to form here. And so I think if we start scrolling up a little bit, yeah, that you can see that sort of start to form now, that most likely they'll be able to at least hit maybe like the end of this particular train. Maybe I'll do it in a different color. So this, I would say that this particular area for them, and then especially this upper area in the orange, will be their aim. So they have about 2.5 days or so to kind of, you know, position themselves somewhere sort of in this area. I mean, they could get as far as like down here, more or less, in that time. And so that will be the goal for them. That will be the system for them, let's say, to kind of get south. And then once they get there, if we run the prediction a bit more, so then we're going towards Monday, that's probably going to keep moving quite nicely along the ice exclusion zone. Yeah, as you can see, it moves nicely forward. And so that's going to be the quote-unquote bus or train that the non-foilers are going to get on. And that's going to help them move for their first part, at least until that system falls apart, into the Southern Ocean. So yeah, that's it for the technical analysis for today. Hope you enjoyed. Hope all that deepened your appreciation for the race a little bit more once again. Thank you all very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, very important as we make our way slowly but certainly to 40,000 subscribers. I think we're already at like 32,000 after clipping 30K last week. So we keep moving on. That's very good. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Have a great evening and see you all in 24 hours. Ciao, ciao.